an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Reaper, chapters 23 and 24. In these chapters, Malice is really living up to her name. And you guys, I don't like where any of this is going, and I'm kind of worried about it. And also, poor Mercy, and so much is happening. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Hey, Andy, if you're out there. There are some people in the chat talking about the strain of having to stop reading after 24. And here's the thing, because I go through this with everything I'm covering, right? And I always... there's inevitably a moment where I have to stop reading at sort of a climactic point, and it really varies whether or not I feel like I want to throw a book out a window because I have to stop right now. And this time, I didn't feel like I wanted to do that because I felt like I needed time to process everything that had just happened. Do you know what I mean? So, there are times where it ends and it feels like everything has been sort of accelerating to a certain point, but hasn't in itself contained a lot to think about, so that when you get to this end point, you're like, but I just barely got a taste of what I want to know. And in this section, there is so much going on. Y'all, this is the thing that I'm sort of stuck on, in terms of me feeling like my understanding isn't quite where it needs to be. The reason exactly behind the way that the monarchs cause the creation of the dread gods, or cause them to remain, I don't feel like I'm processing exactly how that cause and effect works. It's just, I feel like I'm not totally getting it. And so there's a point in the last section where, I mentioned about Lyndon and his friends wanting to become monarchs and how I thought that would make it worse, the whole situation. And I didn't see it until after I had wrapped and clicked end for the crowdcast, but somebody in the chat said there can be new monarchs. Essentially, the monarchs that we have right now are the ones that fucked shit up, but new monarchs can be raised up without issue. And I was like, oh, okay, then maybe I'm not really understanding how all this works. But then in this chapter, Lyndon is talking to Malice, and when she mentions raising him up, he's low-key disgusted that she knows the effect that her and the others are having and are still okay with raising up yet more monarchs. He's really, he has to hide everything that he's feeling from her. But his whole energy for the entire conversation is, bitch, fuck you, really though, And so that felt like my initial knee reaction was correct. So I'm just a little curious about if I miss something that feels like it'll explain this. MHan00, I read through the entire book the first night it released. I meant to savor it over a week, but I couldn't stop. People who can must have amazing self-control. Oh, hi, Andy. Andy's waving. I don't have amazing self-control, but I like my job, so I try to do it. But if I were not doing this, are you kidding? Yeah, this book would be done in a day. No problem. Done. I would just absolutely, I'd probably do a thing that I've done before with the new Butcher books when they dropped. I just made sure to take that day off. Make sure. Sush says, monarchs are the source of Cradle's hunger aura. The dread gods were an attempt to funnel that aura so it didn't just run free. Okay, But how are they the source of hunger aura? I think, Sush, you zeroed in, I think, on exactly what I'm not understanding. Because that was the energy I was getting, but I don't understand why they're creating it and others aren't, I guess. Asher says, I think it has to do with hunger madra. Jan says, the monarchs are too spiritually heavy for the planet. Hunger aura is sort of an opposing balancing force. Oh, I think I get it. Okay. I think I get it, Jan. Thank you for that. I think, okay. So basically, they're feeding like so much into things that the hunger aura has to be there to pull it out and keep things like on the even keel. Caleb, by ascending to both Sage and Herald, they are too powerful. Oops, sorry, the chat is moving so fast. They're too powerful for the iteration to contain sustainably. Their conceited desire to stay creates hunger aura, which feeds the dread gods. Okay, so their desire to stay creates hunger aura? Like the actual desire itself? Is that like them being sort of power hungry, I guess? Or is it, because the way that Jan said it, it felt like it was sort of like a naturally occurring balancing feature. But the way that Caleb is describing it sounds like it's a flaw from their personalities, kind of. Jake says the existence of monarchs is what creates hunger aura. The more there are, the more hunger there is, and the stronger the dread gods are. Nahua says, I think I was the one who made the comment last time, and I think it was sarcastic or in relation to what someone else was saying. Other monarchs would be an issue, definitely. Okay, cool. Rob says, I thought the comment was saying that hunger madra was the problem, so getting rid of the old monarchs is the first goal, but a secondary goal has to be the prevention of new monarchs until the dread gods are killed. That is also part of what I was assuming, Rob. I want to get this part settled, though, and make sure that I understand this part before I move on to that. Jake says it's because they're too powerful for Cradle. They basically ascended bodies and spirits, but remain in the world. If the monarchs ascended, the hunger aura would slowly disappear. B. Moore says, hunger aura is the corruption the Abaddon are dealing with when things violate causality and the natural order of things. Caleb says, yes, their powerful hunger to own everything on the planet is what makes it. At least that's how I read it. Yama says, I feel like I'm more confused now. Low-key a little bit. Like, I think I'm getting what y'all are saying, but most of you, the only explanation you've got is the monarchs being there causes hunger aura. And that's like what Caleb's explanation of like their greed causing the hunger aura to become more prolific. That feels like that's a reason. Just the monarchs being there does not explain how that happens. Do you get what I'm saying? So if it's the monarch's greed causing hunger aura to multiply, that feels really different to me for some reason than nature forcing an equilibrium by creating hunger aura to sort of eat up the like overpowered aspect of their madra or their pressure, their spiritual pressure and presence. And not that it would really change like the requirements for how to fix it, because obviously what has to happen is they have to fucking ascend. But I'm just really curious if this is something that just automatically happens just because power becomes unsustainable in the environment, or is a certain type of personality going to produce more than another type. Do you know what I'm saying? Sush says, too long didn't read. We're all guessing. Okay. If you're guessing, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I didn't like miss an explanation that got to the heart of that. Because I try and really pay a lot of attention and I read multiple times, but I still miss stuff. You guys know, you've pointed out things to me before that I did not get the first time. So I just want to make sure that I'm not like overlooking a part of the conversation that would have answered this question. Andy says, other sacred artists also express greed, but the monarchs have out-leveled Cradle. Hunger aura is one side effect. Attack that causes cracks in reality is another side effect. Okay. So, and this is really interesting too, because Elliot says we don't really know why it happens. Mechanism is a mystery still. Okay, cool. So we could go with either one. I'm tending to believe it's the like greed in wanting to have power that like makes the most sense in terms of the intent being a factor. Although I do kind of like the idea of hunger aura being something that's like naturally and spontaneously occurring in response to overpoweredness, the way that, you know, like Little Blue, she is what's the name of the type of creature Little Blue is? But they are naturally occurring in places where like water aura and another kind of aura, I don't remember, are like really dense, and it can cause this like sort of spontaneous creation of these little spirits. So like that was what I was also thinking it might be. Do you know how that works? Like Riverseed, Sylvan Riverseed. Thank you, Andy. Caleb says, here's the quote. It is a corruption of the natural order of cradle, a manifestation of ambition, of selfish desire. Okay. Thank you, Caleb. I hope I'm saying your name right. Is it Caleb or Caleb? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, cool. Yay. I feel like I get it now. Appreciate you guys all being here and like feeding me information, by the way. It's just very helpful because this is a very dense series. I don't know what I would do. Like there's stuff that I cover that isn't really of interest to a lot of people. So there's somebody commissioning it and I cover it and I do it exactly the same way. But sometimes there's like nobody in the chat. Literally, there's not a single person, or there's like two people and they're kind of tuning in and out and they don't really reply to questions. So I really appreciate when there's like a bunch of people and they're all, you know, contributing to my understanding what's going on here. So it's interesting that is like the way that things have shaken out, because I think I expressed some interest in the fact that I think it was uncrowned, but it might, I don't remember which book it was, but there is a point at which one of Machiel's like little bitches comes down and he has the weapon prize and he sort of gives them the chance to ascend. And it's clear that that chance has been extended before. And I believe that we're in Northstrider's POV at that point, and he like thinks about the fact that he definitely wasn't going to do that shit. And I was surprised by it because I was like, that seems like a dope deal. You get to like continue to ascend. I mean, you get to a point in Cradle where your growth can't continue. And why wouldn't you want to move on to a place where you continue to gain power? And the conclusion that we all sort of came to through chats and like further reading was that the Abaddon are kind of janky bitches sometimes and don't seem to care in the personal way about Cradle that the monarchs want them to. And so the monarchs resent being told they have to ascend because they're like, there is so much shit that needs doing here. I'm absolutely not going to leave it to you guys because y'all would just not handle it. But now, knowing that these like dread gods are from Monarch's presence, that changes it all. And I'm real curious whether or not this was something that Will knew already that he was going to have set up. I think Will has planned pretty much all of this ahead of time, but he may not have. I don't know, you know. I think there's a real trap that people fall into as well, and I have done this myself, where more respect is given to a story if the writer planned it all ahead of time than respect is given to things where the writer sort of came up with the twist they wanted along the way. And I don't think there's anything like better about planning ahead than there is things developing and you figuring out what you want to do along the way. It's a shame sometimes because I feel like writers feel the need to say that they had it all planned out because it makes them look like they're a real Machiavellian genius. But I don't really think it matters. You wrote it, you created a world, whether you let it evolve with your writing and your growth as a person, or you figured out a structure and organized things around that, you still wrote a fucking book. Good for you. You did it. Congratulations. And it's interesting being in Northstrider's head. He doesn't think about that at all, and it really changes the way that I see him, especially. Malice, can I see her staying in this world despite this? Absolutely. Malice clearly loves power. Like, that's just been her fucking deal since day one. We've known that about her. But Northstrider, I have given some additional credit. I have thought of him as somebody who cared more and was more compassionate, and he could be a fucking hard ass and, for example, not saving Harmony. I mean, just the absolute fucking most OG move in the world. But in a grander sense, he seems to have a sense of justice and fairness. And yet, what the fuck, dude? Like, what are you doing? So this just changes everything for me. It's just like, I don't know. Evil says Northstrider doesn't want to be on the bottom of the pole when he ascends. B. Moore says Northstrider does want to ascend, but he wants to be as strong as possible before he does. He doesn't want to start at the bottom again. This is interesting to me because why does he think anything is going to keep him from being at the bottom? Like, I would just assume no matter how strong you are for Cradle, you ascend and you're at the bottom. You're brand fucking new. You're a freshman. That's it. So I'm just curious about, like, why does he think this is going to really make a difference? Because, you know, it's like taking AP classes and thinking that that's going to put you in your sophomore, junior year of college. Like, that's not exactly how that works. M. Han says, Emrys was also assassinated for trying to educate people. This book certainly makes it seem obvious she was trying to expose how hunger aura was being generated, and that is why she was killed. I'm sure she'd be willing to leave once she knows the other monarchs would too, or if they're dead, and the Dread Gods can be killed. I'm going to be talking about Emrys in a bit. Okay, so I can't keep talking about what's happening in the chat or I will never get started. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm going to have to start to ignore you for a little while. Forgive me. So we start off this section with Yaren and Athen stepping out of the portal almost at the same time, it feels like. Like, she didn't realize he was right there. And looking around and getting a grip on the situation. And reminder, already up there are Mercy and Orthos and Little Blue. And they are surrounded by the blood artists. Oh my gosh, what is their name? But it is a really fun bit because we get more of a sense, this and another moment later on, where Yaren apparently like fucks up a sacred artist who I think they said was like an underlord, but still really such a low level that there wasn't much honor in the fact that she killed this guy. Yaren is having a hard time keeping shit under control. She is getting, I feel like there is more, it feels like her impulse control has gotten a little bit worse. And I can't tell if that's just because she's under stress, because there's something like happening internally with the way that she advanced, or if it's just like, you know, it just seems like that to the way I'm reading it, and that's not actually what's supposed to be going on at all. But she gets into it like right away. And I love this moment. The Archlady's blood shadow in the form of a cobra let out a hiss like a tunnel full of snakes all hissing at once. But it was the Red Moon emissary herself who raised a weapon to stop Yaren. A crystal hand axe flashed out of her soul space and into her hand as Yaren's attack landed. The small weapon stopped Yaren's blow, but it had her full strength behind it. The Archlady's knees half buckled and the ground beneath her cracked before she managed to turn the sword aside. You've got about a breath and a half before I stop being friendly. She's not lying, Athen observed. That was friendly. Mercy affected a shocked look. Oh, look, it's Yaren and Athen. What are the odds? Oh my God. Do you guys know how much more it hurts to watch Mercy get yelled at later when she's like such a bright light of joy and goodness? She's just so pure. And her dickbag mom screaming at her about how she would have taken control of, just get lost. Get lost, lady. You suck. You're out here creating dread gods. That's how bad you suck. Like, the breadth and width of your sucking cannot be overstated. Ugh. Hater. So, Yaren, at this point, is, like, aware that Red Faith is watching. And she's like, all right, look. If he wants to talk, I'll meet him wherever he wants, but only after you take us back to our people. Can't relax until I make sure nobody's missing. And Red Faith, who it turns out is listening quite closely, like does the voice projecting, we need an assurance of your sincerity. And Yaren, when she's given the chance, does ask she asks Ethan, can we go back down to Linden? Just, which I thought was interesting. Like, would she have gone back down with everybody if she could have and like taken all of these people with her and tried to help because they had a bigger crew now? And I don't know if that would be okay though, because that would technically be putting her in further danger, which he like explicitly forbids. But anyway, okay. Then we go to Jailong, and I don't need to spend too much time on this bit, but I will say that it was really, really fun. I feel like what Will keeps doing with Jailong, which I just find personally delightful, is he gives Jailong these scenarios in which if circumstances were different, Jailong would look like a badass. Like, he would look like somebody to be reckoned with. But because the situations are never actually what Jailong thinks, he winds up looking like a bit of a dodo bird after all. Like, he's trying really hard, and that's great, but also you can tone it down a tiny bit, buddy. It's just funny because I'm waiting for the time where he gets to turn it up to 11 the way he has been. And it actually like works out for him. But it's just fun to watch him sort of deflate once he's got himself worked up into a frenzy. So he is waiting for his crew to get reunited here. Sunset is coming, and he isn't seeing his friends come back, and he's starting to get really worried. And I love that at one point he goes and like asks after them. And let's see, here it is. He pressed his fist together and bowed to the sky-sworn woman. Please send someone to inform me when they check in, he said. She gave him a sympathetic look and a pat on the shoulder. By this time tomorrow, you'll be an Underlord. You'll be able to take revenge yourself. And I was just like, look, I get that she's trying to be encouraging. And she's like, I understand. But in reality, being like, I'm sure they're dead, but you'll be able to avenge them is not as comforting in the moment as I think she thought. Just don't do it. I just felt really like, I was surprised that he didn't respond with a little bit more asperity. It just says Jailong didn't care what was going to happen tomorrow. He needed results today. I really thought he was going to be like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? They're not dead. They're fine. They're not dead. What do you mean? But instead, he just sort of like lets it roll off him, which honestly, to me, feels like a bit of growth. But maybe I'm giving him a bit more of a hot temper than he actually has, because he can be very paranoid and he can be very jealous. And I mean jealous in the way that he like guards what he considers like his territory and property. But his temper, I guess I haven't really seen it to be that unbalanced, now that I stop and think about it. I sort of interpret him that way in my mind because he is somebody who jumps to fighting as the solution for things, but those aren't necessarily hand in hand. So he goes out into the battle despite the fact that he is in the midst of basically like leveling up, which makes him vulnerable. The fact that he is in the middle of this process is fucking his like Madra channels up. Everything about the way that he would normally fight is like a little bit glitchy, essentially. So he's running out there and he's about to track them down and really going for it, despite the fact he isn't even at his usual strength. Never mind reached Underlord yet. And there is this moment here where he winds up like underneath a attack that it's an Overlord level battle, and he's underneath it. So they're not like aiming for him, but he's getting the blowback from it. The two sacred artists were zipping across the sky. Jai Long had balanced slipping past them with staying out of the way, but there was only so much he could do. A blast of wind from the Emperor tore apart a tree to his right, and he was caught with an enhanced gust of wind that tossed him 30 feet back and peppered him with sharp splinters. He managed to land on his feet and block his eye with an arm, but his body was covered with tiny cuts and scratches. If the attack had been a few yards closer, it would have shattered every bone in his body. At best. Jai Long plunged forward. That, for me, is a real nice summary of what he's like. He almost got, like, actually crushed to death, and he's just like, whatever, and just keeps moving forward. It's just not... Doesn't care. Jai Long don't care. He's like a honey badger. And as he heads in, all of a sudden, he crests a hill, and he spots all of his people. Yeren sat with her arms crossed in the center of a circle of blasted trees, looking sullen, as Athan danced from one side of an arrow pass to the other at Archlord speed to cut off the retreat of a bunch of Stormcallers who looked very frightened. Mercy was there, holding Orthos and Little Blue, and it seemed like she was lecturing Yeren about something. Jai Chen was on her knees, catching her breath while an agitated fingerling swirled in the air over her head. Kelsa was nearby, her foxfire tail lashing. She faced a low-gold Stormcaller who shuffled from foot to foot nervously and kept glancing behind him. And this is when we find out that Yeren's defending, like, oh, well, he was at least an Underlord. And Mercy is just like, well, come on, though, man. Like, I get what you meant, but we can't act like this. And I love Athan saying, yes, let's go back to murdering each other more honorably. It is really funny. Like, I think that the rules are in place for a good reason. And I totally understand the difference in vibe between going after somebody who's just, you know, picking on somebody your own size. There's a reason that that's a thing. But it is funny when somebody just sort of spells out how weird it is that we have these, like, mental rules of honor, and when it comes down to it, what we're doing is just trying to kill each other, like, you know. And in the end, he comes up to his sister and just says, I came to save you. Kelsa nodded seriously. Gratitude. Y'all, I don't know why, but her saying seriously, like, or not her saying it, but it's saying that she nodded seriously, that fucking killed me a little bit. Her, like, there's a part of me that thinks that she's being serious in response because she knows that maybe he feels like a little bit of an idiot, and so she's trying to sort of, like, soften the blow a little bit that they did not need him. But this bit is so fucking funny to me. And especially, like, the Stormcallers wind up running off, and Zeal appears and is like, yo, Stormcallers, word? And they have to be like, they were low level. And he's like, oh, so bummed out. Y'all, Zeal is out here looking for a fight now. I'm really excited about this development. That's not to say that he wasn't, like, game to fight a Stormcaller before, but there's just something extra about it this time. You know what I mean? He's coming along to them faster because of the presence of Stormcallers, whereas it more felt like before, a Stormcaller gets tossed in his path and he will fuck a motherfucker up, but he isn't going to like go out of his way about it. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm just seeing this as like a positive sign. We're moving forward here. B. Moore says, Will says he frets over every book being darker and lacking humor, while the fans keep saying each book is funnier and funnier due to scenes like these. Yeah, that's interesting, because I feel like you don't need as much humor in volume if the humor you're using is always a foil against an even more dramatic high-stakes situation. You know what I mean? It's like the humor that you place during moments like this where he thought like his favorite people were dead, essentially. And then he just stumbles across them being like petty and yelling at each other. That is such a change in tone so suddenly that I feel like that's like concentrated humor. And before there was more of it, but it was a little bit more diluted. So it still works just as well. It's just you're being more careful with where it is, and so it has more of a punch when it happens. So yeah, I am just, this whole bit with Jai Long is so funny to me. So then we go to Raygon Shen. We go to fucking Raygon Shen. Okay, look. I think there have been, probably, if I were to stop and really think about it, some villains in things that I have covered that I maybe hated more than him. But I can't believe how much my mind recoils from reading from his perspective when we have to do it. I don't want to be in his head. I don't like it there. He is such duplicitous trash. And everything that he asks for, everything that he claims he's going to do, it's like, is there technically a bond to his word behind it? Yeah, but there's never any sense of actual honor in there. And the way that he looks at everyone around him is so... It's exhausting because he's constantly ragging on whoever he's talking to or ready to like slap somebody. And he doesn't, but he wants to and is actively having to hold himself back. And there are ways to do that kind of thing with a character where you're still sort of on their side, you know? And obviously, like, that is not of interest to Will at all. And I'm glad. I don't want to feel like I'm at all on Raygon Shen's side. But it's just funny, the difference between somebody who has disdain for everybody around them and you're kind of like, this dude is hilarious. And a guy like this who has disdain for everyone around them and you just want them to be crushed to death. This whole bit, too, what kills me is that he's so weakened. And it felt like, well, somebody do something. Like, he is so worn down. And then I realized he has all of these allies around him for a reason. He knew he was going to come out of here worn down. He knew that he was going to be a prime target. I don't think that he counted on shit going quite as left as it did, as quickly as it did. And as we find out, he anticipated that he was going to get to take the labyrinth, which Lyndon takes. Guys, I'm so excited, but also worried about him taking the labyrinth. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not sure what the parameters are of his abilities now. But this dude, after finding out that he is keeping Tiberian's remnant as like a fucking attack dog, I like pure garbage. I just wrote him off. That is it for me, you know? So, the Blood Sage, Silent Sage, and Storm Sage arrived first, followed soon by the Herald of Abyssal Palace. To them he presented a sealed silver box. "I have succeeded," he said gravely. All their eyes lit up at once, as well they should. This binding was the mythical item that their idols had sought since time immemorial. And again, him being teamed up with these people, my assumption is that eventually he would have crushed them all. Now, I'm assuming that because shit doesn't go according to plan exactly, he's not really going to get a chance to do that. But he's still trying. He's still like calling the dread gods to him. So maybe he will still attempt to crush them all. Or I don't know. I feel like crushing them, I don't really know how much use that is. Perhaps keeping them in power but on his side is really the way to go. But I also don't really know if these people had been loyal to him for now, in exchange for getting this binding. After they get it, do they continue to feel a sense of loyalty to him? Is there like a deal that keeps them under his protection, in quotes, up until a certain point? Or is it just sort of like, you know what I'm saying? I'm just really not sure the way that any of these people view loyalty, because of how corrupted their whole vibes seem to be already. Rhaegon Shen seized the wind aura and drifted into the air. He held the silver box aloft and projected his voice with herald lungs. I'm the Emperor of the Rose Gold Continent, and I have returned in glory. I invite my peers to witness my triumph. And at this point, Malice is like, wait a minute. So are you thinking that you can leave with that? And North Strider doesn't say anything, because that's how he rolls. He just stares. And Rhaegon Shen is like, yeah, actually, you guys really have underestimated me. Clearly, I can absolutely do what I want. And I was going to have shared this with you, but y'all have no vision. And here we are now up against each other when we didn't need to be. And this is when he opens the silver cube and the binding of the wraith just warps space around him, and the hunger icon appears. A widened mouth full of sharpened fangs. Dope. And this poor, I keep thinking there's so many moments in these two chapters specifically where people who are of lower advancement are just fucking killed because of the effect of whatever intense aura is happening around them. And this isn't resulting in any deaths right here, but people are having to brace themselves, and later on, I think it's the Phoenix waking up. No, it's not, but I'll get there. But one of them gives a cry of excitement and it kills thousands of people. Just their screech of joy at finally being free. And I was just like, that really sucks. Being of low advancement really has downsides that feel, most of the time, those downsides feel sort of petty and mundane. You aren't going to make as much money, or you're not going to have the sort of social status. But then there are moments like this where it's just such an obvious, oh no, you're much more vulnerable at all times to whatever. And that is rough. So if you call the dread gods here, you will all perish with us. I promise you that. That's Malice. Here? I don't need them here. Not yet. Then he activated the binding in his palm. Invisible power and white aura thundered out, traveling along invisible metaphysical paths. He had never known this was possible, never gained the insight necessary into the mechanics of reality until Tiberian gave him the hint. Then he'd researched on his own. He'd consulted with the sage of red faith, even gathering dread god cults to gain their knowledge on the invincibility of the dread gods. Ultimately, he'd realized what he'd needed to do. He would fuse with this binding and become the new slumbering wraith, attaining immortality and power beyond the dreams of monarchs. He had intended to take over the labyrinth first, then recover his power, then become the new dread god. He was doing things a little out of order, but it would all be worth it. All of it, once the dread gods were awakened. And I just cannot that he saw what was going on with the slumbering wraith that he killed, and he somehow thinks that's just not going to be at all how it goes for him, or that he like can definitely withstand it. He has to know something else, or else it's just pure hubris. But I can't, like, and how does he intend to consume the dread gods? Like, how is he going to take them into his control? Because my assumption is that if it's hunger power, he can pull them to him, and then he can do something to like subjugate them or pull their power out of them into him. But I have no idea how that works exactly. And then we go to the sort of like montage, if you will, of each of the dread gods having their moment of awakening. The Wandering Titan is burrowing underneath the city, causing a collapse and the death of thousands and thousands of people. And then all of a sudden, it caught the scent of something irresistible. Its stone head snapped up, and one of the cliffs around it snapped off and shattered to dust on its shoulder. This was the smell of the original. The Titan reached up to the surface and began to haul itself up. It was going to return to the origin of this scent, and maybe it would finally be satisfied. A golden aura on which it had fed flashed white. Then, at last, it got a taste of what it meant to feel content. Everything else it had ever eaten was nothing. It was just a lick, while this was a full meal. Can I tell you how much I just love that? I feel like it would be very tempting for a lot of people to say it was just a bite while this was a full meal, but a lick versus a full meal is so much more evocative, and there's just so much more of a gulf between the two, and it just works really well. I felt like it put things into perspective excellently. And then we go to the Bleeding Phoenix, and it's thinking about people who fucked with it. One of them being Malice. And who is the other person it's thinking of? A tiny man with punches that summon blood. That's Northstrider, right? And what's interesting about the Phoenix is that it's got like a variety of personalities sort of talking to each other within it. So it gets sort of confused, and it can't make decisions easily. It's just having a hard time like focusing its thoughts, which is a theme with all of the dread gods, but it's different for each of them, you know? And then all of a sudden it remembered, yeah, here it is. The male human was Northstrider, a monarch who had stolen power, some of the Phoenix's power in particular. The dread god was irritated at its past self for allowing Northstrider to touch it. The female human was Malice, queen of the Akura clan. Her lands were not far. A moment ago, the Phoenix had plenty of strength, but only instinct controlling it. Now its increase in power was negligible compared to its clarity. It knew what to do. It began to dissolve its body into droplets that fell like rain, spread itself widely, and liquefied as the droplets teleported away. Nope. Don't like that. Y'all, I'm not excited about this. Like, it feels like this bitch is just straight up, oh, let me go fuck up Akura territory in particular. And, like, I hate Malice, but, like, Malice isn't going to be the one to suffer here, right? I hate this. These fucking people. So then, Weeping Dragon. And the dragon would check on what had happened later. There might be something to learn, but for now, it would relish being in control of its own body. It wanted more than just food. It wanted shelter, a domain, children, servants, treasures. It wanted everything. Which sounds a little familiar. Does have me worried about Lyndon a tiny bit. I could tell myself that Lyndon was being influenced by the Hunger Madra down there, but I don't feel like it would have resonated, and he wouldn't have been able to kick Rhaegon Shin out if that wasn't actually, like, true. And he also, I think, saying, I want everything is what got him to advance. So yeah. Lyndon as a monarch would really destabilize things, I feel like. And then we go to the Silent King on the Everwood continent. And this is what I found really fascinating. And forgive me, I forget who it was that mentioned Emrys earlier, but Emrys Silentborn has been absolutely fascinating to me, and I have been wanting to learn more about her. And I'm hoping that now that this whole thing has sort of begun to come out into the open a little bit more, we're going to get to talk to her a bit, be in her POV perhaps. I don't know. But I think that she sounds extremely compelling as a character because of how much more of a conscience she seems to have, and the way that she has attempted to, it seems as if she has attempted to forestall the worst of the damage and almost perhaps leave really vague hints around by using this educational tool. And I'm really curious about her. So the king, who is the giant, house-sized tiger, right? And it's mentioned that it's a lot smaller than its brothers and sisters, but it has more clarity more of the time. It ran its spiritual perception around the boundaries of its kingdom. Roots stretched all around it. Roots under her command. Its greatest enemy. And it liked to imagine the elaborate revenge it would take on Emrys Silentborn. It dreamed of revenge even more often than it dreamed of plans to restore its power. The only reason for achieving its full potential was for revenge. That, and to spread its peace all over the world. And I'm like, I don't know what your peace means exactly. There's a description earlier about the fact that everybody is kind of getting along in a certain way. And there's I'm just going to read that part. Its subjects filled the jungle for hundreds of miles. They lived in cities, talked, joked, created art. Remnants crept by newborn sacred beasts, and both traded respectful nods. Neither should be as intelligent or aware as they were, but thanks to their king, they could live up to their full domain. This sounds good. Honestly, what he's describing, I don't exactly know what it's like for the people that he's describing, but from the outside, that looks like a good thing. And then he just opens his mouth and a sacred artist jumps into his mouth. There are just people standing there ready to be eaten and just willing to do it. And my brain's short-circuited over that, guys. I can't even say short-circuited because that's how much it's short-circuited. I don't understand how anybody ever could and I know that this is a thing. I know that there have been people willing to sacrifice themselves in history for various gods and whatever, and I still my head has never wrapped around that. And I'm wondering, the piece that he is describing, is he responsible for it? Or is it actually Emrys Silentborn's root system that creates the boundaries that is more responsible for it? I'm not sure if it knows the truth to that or not. And Emrys Silentborn keeping it sort of corralled here is really interesting. What is her interest in doing it this way? And did she have a further plan? Because monarchs are essentially immortal. And I'm wondering if she knew that eventually there was going to come a day when somebody was fucking around. And I don't know. This is just extremely the fact that he is able to evidently get people to completely throw themselves into his mouth. I'm going to guess she's just protecting people against that sort of influence is the tamest way to put that. But I don't know. I just feel she's got a whole other thing she's doing. She just feels there's another angle going on with her. And then this bit, who had killed the Wraith? Who could have breached that prison? The Silent King had tried personally centuries ago and failed. Whoever it was, the dread god owed them a debt. One day, if it was so inclined, it would repay that service. Perhaps this mysterious savior would enjoy a continent in thanks. No, stop it. No, Silent King, do not give him an additional continent. He has one already. He got one. He doesn't need another one. Don't do it. Ugh, I hate this so much. Its will drew tight, more potent than ever, and the wills of everyone in its kingdom focused as well. Some died of exertion, blood running from their eyes, but most could handle this slight burden of will. Hate it. Hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. This whole thing is just so... Oh, God. Okay, everybody in the chat is saying that what the Silent King is doing is basically mind control. And that's why, it seems peaceful on the outside because nobody has free will. That makes sense. I can't, each of these, they're just terrible. I'll say it. The dread gods are bad. I'm going to take a stand. You may argue with me, but they seem bad to me. All right, so now we go into chapter 24, and we get a little bit of Osriel. We actually saw what happens here already, but we get sort of a refresher here from his point of view. He first had wanted somebody to challenge him, and as he gets older, and as he continues to experience the worlds through the eyes of somebody with the job that he has, his compassion seems to take the place of the pride that he had. I won't say take the place of, but it grows in proportion, probably, to the pride that he had. So then he goes and changes the message that he had left in that little beacon, and we get the message that we saw Ethan share with everybody in, what was that, book 4 maybe? And this, I really liked, getting to see that his priorities changed, that he had this initial sort of challenge, and then it turns from a challenge to help me. I like this growth for him. And we find out that he's hiding with the full expectation that they're going to find him eventually, because there is no way to actually hide the essence of who you are from the Abaddon. It's just impossible. So wherever he goes, he has to sort of prepare himself for the eventuality that they will catch up. And then he is at limit, and somebody shows up with this tremendous power, but an essence that is unfamiliar. And he's like, how is that possible for somebody to have this much power and I don't know who they are? This doesn't make any sense. And then he faces them, and it turns out it's the Mad King, and he has a kind of cloaking on his spirit that keeps him seeming unfamiliar. And Osriel is like, word? That's exactly what I wanted. Hey, thanks. And the Mad King leaves, and Osriel lets him leave because he knows that it's not likely that he will be able to beat him or vice versa. They're pretty evenly matched. And so he sends the Mad King away, but he keeps this shroud. And that is, I am assuming, how he is still hiding. I'm really curious about where he is, guys, because I feel like he's going to have to turn out to be somewhere significant, but it's specifically mentioned he isn't going back to Cradle because he's sort of over it. It feels like people in Cradle should be better than they are, and he's been sort of let down by them. And so I would have probably guessed that he was in hiding somewhere in Cradle if it wasn't explicitly spelled out that he wouldn't want to go back there. Even so, he may still have done, but I don't think so. So yeah, this whole thing here is really something because he is like taking this and letting the Mad King go with the understanding to himself, like I've looked into the different futures and what kind of threat the Mad King could pose. And unless he gets a ridiculously overpowered weapon, there's really no way that he's going to turn out to be a problem. But as we know, the Mad King now has a ridiculously overpowered weapon. So Suriel, time's up, bud. You may want to come out of your little hidey hole. Because shit's starting to really go left, bud. I need you to step up here. Like, it was a small, vanishingly small possibility. But guess what? It happened. So, all right. Time to go. Oof. So, then we go to Lyndon. And he pulls the body of Subject 1 off of the throne and sits down on it and has a series of battles of will to take over the labyrinth. And it's really interesting. First of all, we've got Dross talking to him. And there is something pretty interesting. I closed my Discord app because it draws so much RAM when I open it on my desktop that my GarageBand will sometimes stop running. So forgive me. I think it was Cindy who posted this comment. And she said something like in the no spoilers chat for Cradle on their Discord, what if the point of Dross's deal essentially is that you can't fix him. And sometimes friends are changed by trauma, and that change is permanent and not fixable. And you have to learn how to love them for the changed, traumatized person that they now are. And honestly, Cindy, go to hell for that, because I wanted to cry reading it because it's probably exactly the thing. And I miss Dross so much, and I can't believe that you would make me feel these feelings about it, because it makes a lot of sense, and I just didn't need to hear it, because I wanted to cling to my comforting idea that we can just go back to our old friend Dross. And now I'm sort of thinking you might be right, and that's devastating and also extremely poignant and moving, and I don't like it. So, like I said, Cindy, I love you, but screw you also. So that's that. Anyway, you guys don't know. I read that and I was like trying to formulate a response on Discord, and I was just like, I can't even do this right now. I'm just going to wait till I record, because I can't. Like, that just got to me so bad. Oh, God. All right. So he has to go up against all of these different sorts of levels of the labyrinth about his identity and who he is, challenging Rhaegon Shen and the fact that he was born in Sacred Valley and the hunger mantra that he uses. And then there comes this point with the Abaddon. He even has a moment with like Osmanthus's authority, and he's like, I'm an adopted member of the Aurelius family. I'm the apprentice of Aethan Aurelius, and it appears to be enough as well. But then there are the 7 creators of the labyrinth. You know what? I said that they were Abaddon, but I don't know if that's true. There are 7 Abaddon though, right? He could scarcely comprehend their power, but they felt like 7 pillars of order and structure. When these demanded to know who he was, he had no answer. And he starts to almost pass out here and grabs Suriel's marble to comfort himself. And the grabbing of the marble, all of a sudden, it's like they all go, oh, she picked you. Okay, it's fine then. And just completely, it all snaps back into place around him. And he gets a sense of the scope of the labyrinth and finds himself completely overwhelmed at the scope of the thing. It's so much bigger than he ever expected. And that is very, very interesting to me, because I have 100% assumed that labyrinth is located in Sacred Valley. All of the tunnels and whatnot are located in Sacred Valley. I never, ever even considered that it continues on to other, and there was one piece missing, and he looked down to where a severed, once human arm lay in his lap. "Mine," Lyndon said, and the word was a command. The arm flowed into his own. Outside the labyrinth, Lyndon doubted whether he could do it. The remaining will of Subject 1 crashed into his like a stone falling from heaven, and even with Dross's support, he once again came close to losing consciousness. But the power of the labyrinth was the power of Subject 1, and he owned it. Its will was his own. And so he just makes an arm. That caught me off guard. I didn't think it was going to go like that. He just straight up is like, no, I want this arm, so it's mine. And it is. It just is. Now it's just his arm. Word? We could do that now? I wasn't aware that's how shit could be, but damn. And like he says, outside of the labyrinth, unlikely he could. But I mean, even with this power, the fact that he can is like pretty impressive. Jesus Christ. And he can even touch with it. There's even like a sense of texture that he didn't have with his other arm. And so it feels like getting his own arm back in a lot of ways, which I had sort of forgotten that as much as when he ascended to Underlord, his arm stopped looking like a skeleton arm and began to look like a human arm again, but just white. And so I guess I assumed that he had that tactile experience with that arm, but evidently not. So, yikes. That sucks. Like, that had to be difficult. So, this bit is great. He stretched out his authority to the edges of his property and sensed intruders. He found it was effortless to separate between those he accepted and those he didn't. If they were connected to him or to the valley, they could stay. If they weren't, they couldn't. They were no longer welcome. With an effort of will conducted by the ancient scripts engraved into the labyrinth millennia ago, Lyndon made it so. I am so excited because essentially Rhaegon Shen's in the middle of his fucking victory lap, and Lyndon just sends him back to the locker room. It's just so abrupt. It's so great. And Northstrider thinks that this is part of Shen's escape plan. He thinks that Shen is behind it and that Lyndon is teamed up with Rhaegon Shen. Meanwhile, Malice is fucking manic because she's so excited because she knows who did this and what's going on. He felt them reappear, but it was far away, thousands of miles, reappearing over a distant branch of the labyrinth. Northstrider's first reaction was jealousy. He had tried to take over the labyrinth many years ago. I love that he's just like, what the fuck? I wanted that. Keep on reminding me that you're not so elevated, Northstrider. I need it. I do need it. I appreciate it. And then Lyndon. He ejects himself from the labyrinth, and instead of arriving on the surface, is in this darkness, and here's Malice. And essentially, Malice is like, what's up? I really did a good job investigating you. Damn. There's a vibe to her that I almost thought she was going to try and make him part of her harem kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's not that overt because I think she knows that he's very much with Yaren. But if he were not, I would not be a bit surprised if Malice was like, what you doing later though? It's just, there was something about this. And she summons Athan as well, because she is assuming Ethan knows the information as well. And she doesn't know for sure if he's been sworn to secrecy, but she wants to make sure for herself. So she makes Lyndon and Ethan both like swear oaths that they won't tell anybody about what's going on. And Lyndon makes the promise, again with the assumption like, oh, Dross can tell them. And Malice is not that stupid. I'm really glad too, because if that were a loophole he could use, I was going to be like, really? But no, she gets Dross pulled out of Lyndon and makes him swear. Dross tries to be like, I have seen the secrets of monarchs and it has changed me. And she like slaps him down and is like, you don't get to talk like that because you're not inside a monarch yet. So how about you make your fucking promise and stop mouthing off to me because I don't have time for this. And he does, in summary. He does. And then we have her going and talking to Mercy. I've already talked about this a little, and I'm over time, so I can't give this too much. There's a scene right before this where Malice releases Ethan and Lyndon, and they try to tell Yaren and company, like in various ways. It turns out Lyndon had a recording like structure in his pocket, and he can't even like hand it to her. Like the oath is so binding that he would destroy it, whether like instead of giving it to her, if he tried too hard. And I really like this. As Ethan puts it, these kinds of oaths are about the spirit of the oath, not the letter of the oath. And that's how it should be. And thank you. I really appreciate that personally. Like that's how it should work. And it always bothers me in stories when it is like the letter of, unless that's kind of the way the whole world is, you know, but there's a lot of stories where everything is sort of a general rule, but then when the author wants it to be super specific and have a little bit of a loophole, then there is, and it feels really cheap. But then there's like, you know, in Dresden Files, the Fae are very, very much about loopholes. And that whole thing is the plot. Figuring out how you can get around shit is like the main event. So then it's fine. But I really, really, really like that this is just a blanket, like, no, you can't try that either. Nope, that's also trying to cheat. You can't do that either. Like, thank you. Appreciate it. So, Mercy, her mom is yelling at her for lying to her and not stopping Lyndon and Yaren. And Mercy is like, how in the hell am I supposed to stop them from doing anything? And her mom is essentially like, it's not my problem that you're fucking weak and have failed to advance any further because you had every opportunity. You had every advantage. You were born into like the richest, most talented family, and you were top of the class in the family. There is no reason that you shouldn't be at their level right now, and you aren't, and that's pitiful. And it was just really rough, guys, because like, Mercy is not driven the same way. It's not to say that she isn't driven, but she needs a particular kind of motivation, I think, before she gets like kicked into gear and focused enough. And she hasn't gotten it. And I'm starting to wonder if the motivation she's gonna get is to go up against her mother. Because like, it'd be a thing if her initial awakening insight was, I want my mother to be proud of me. And then like, in the end, it's, I'm going to beat my mom's ass. I don't know. I'd be into it. You know, like we all grow, we all change. So anyway, this whole, it's rough. I hated this. And then we have Lyndon sitting with everybody, and he's talking about how he was able to take the labyrinth for himself. And he pulls out Suriel's marble, and they're looking at it, and they're all, ooh, cool, wow. And then this flame in it shrinks, and it's like a spark. And I love when he's like, what's going on? And Yaren's suggestion is to just shake it. Yaren's 100% the person that kicks the like washing machine, you know? And as they're watching it, it just goes out. 1, what the fuck? And 2, it's a good thing that Lyndon already had taken that labyrinth, because I feel like if this were dead, that shit would not have worked. So I'm glad he did it already, because it was a real close fucking timing there. But does this mean Suriel's dead? Because if Suriel's dead, I don't even know what happened. Like, I don't even know. Ugh. Anyway, all right. I am so over time, as usual. Forgive me, guys. I really do have to wrap up. But reminder, I'm doing an extra recording for this on a day I don't normally. It will be Saturday, March 19th at 4 p.m. Central Time. So if you're already registered for these, you'll get the notification when I'm about to go live. But if you are not and you would like to be there for the finale, that is when it shall be. So I'll try and post this before then, and that way people don't hear about this after the fact. All right, guys, I will talk to you soon. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.